How are
Hi,
you? Good morning.
how are you?
Good, good. I think.
Um, what was the motivation to write the book that you wrote? Tell us about that, Rosa. People want to hear what was the motivation to write the book.
Well, I was doing a series of interviews during COVID uh, about uh, with safety professionals. And I found out that during COVID, they were suffering quite a bit from overwork and stress. And a lot of people felt that even though they were being asked to do all of these extra things, which put in a lot of extra hours, there was no recognition or appreciation for these efforts. And so I put those into my former book that I wrote, the Health and Safety Leadership Strategies, because I began to see that the health and safety professionals, not everyone, but a great many of them, I'd say about at least 50% of them are very active in the social side of the organization. They build relationships with employees, they communicate that they care, and so they play an important role in the company's ability to communicate, we care about you as a person. And it's all because of their personality and their what they want to do, their purpose in life. Then I met Rob Long, and because he's been saying that people are treated very badly. People who work in safety are just treated atrociously, very badly. And he shared some of the stories that he had been getting. I mean, he gets emails all the time like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm besides myself. It's just so awful trying to get something done. Nobody listens to me. And it just so happened that I had done a survey last year, not very big survey. It was like 59 people, and 50% of them said that they were thinking about quitting their job. And they were also talking about all these factors that I just shared with you. I was going to write an article about that. And so I showed it to Rob, and he said, you have a book here. And forget about the survey because it's only 59 people, right? Just delve into the powerful part of the article was the stories, the dialogue that I had had with people. And that's how I began to write about that. And also Rob's famous question, what is your message? What is your message? And forcing me to say, okay, here's my message. I'm focused on safety and health professionals, but it's not just about them. It's about all people because we are neglecting so much human potential in the workplace. We don't listen, we don't notice what people are contributing, who they are, what their purpose is in life, what and therefore we have all of these people who just show up to work and don't contribute not even half of their potential talent. That's the message of the book, really. And then I go into some recommendations about what we might be able to do, like change the educational structure of safety and health professionals. And
What was the motivation? I mean, where does it find meaning in your world? Why is this topic so important to you? Yes, I hear Rob said there's a book out there, but even to write a book, there has to be some the inner meaning to it. I'm trying to get to that inner meaning, Rosa. I would like to know, why does that chime so much with you?
well, as I said, I realized that it wasn't about safety professionals. It was about all the people who don't have direct power, that only have influence. And I have been always one of those people because organizational development uh, is is also filled with people who really care deeply about people. And that was another interesting aspect of my research, was that I began to think, wow, do they are people categorized into those who care too much about people? You have to be suspicious of them. That's my suspicion right there. And I wrote about that in the book. But yeah, it was my own story reflected. In fact, in the opening of the book, I call it, revealing my biases, and that's where I talk about this has been my experience. And it's led me to have an interest in working with safety professionals because I want to support their efforts in making work better for people. That's what I want to do.
And let's just build on that, Rosa. Often experiences are like images that become imprinted in our psyche, and there is a story there. That experiences. Is there any one particular story or stories that you would like to share from where you draw all this attribution and meaning?
Well, I mean, I've had experiences where, as a young woman, I felt that credit for my work was given to other people, and the frustration of saying, hey, what about me? What about my contributions? And having that taken as aggression, that I'm too aggressive, and people saying, well, I don't want to work with her because she's too emotional and too aggressive, and just walking away devastated because I worked so hard and gave everything I had, and then for people to just turn around and say, okay, well, you're not on the project anymore. That's it. And it happened when I was a young woman, but it also happened quite recently. I was working on a project, and I it was a lot of virtual work where a lot of calls were virtual, a lot of planning and discussions, and I would ask questions. I would put them into the chat box, and I get an email from the team leader for that project, and he says that he had a meeting with 3 of the clients, and they think that I'm meddling, that I'm self-promoting and interfering, and that he had agreed with them that that I was only allowed to participate in one group's calls. I could no longer participate in any of the other calls. And so at first, it didn't affect me very much. I thought, oh, well, those are strange words. They only women get called meddlesome, I think. I don't know. Do you know of any men that have ever been called meddlesome? And I understand the self-promotion piece because I had sent an article that I wrote to them. I said, I think you'll be able to understand the problem better if you read this article. And that's self-promoting. I realized that these were gender biases, and also the fact that my questions were disturbing because they didn't know the answers and they didn't fit into any context that they were used to. So I didn't take it to heart. Very proud of myself. However, days went by and my team leader never called me. I mean, he just sent me that email and never called me. And then I started to think, well, why didn't he stand up for me? Why didn't he say, well, what we should do is we should have a call with her and find out why she's asking these questions and what she's trying to accomplish? He didn't. I'm sure he's the one that recommended that I just not attend any of the calls, that was a solution. And he's paying me a lot of money. He's paying me what I'm worth, but he still doesn't value it. I don't know what to say about that. So I struggled with myself But I continued to work with the one group that I had been said that you can work with them, because I really liked those women, and they were really trying to do something new and different in the company. I said, well, why should I withdraw from supporting them? And so I continued, and I have to, on my life, I had to compartmentalize, say, when you get a note like that, you should really resign if you don't feel that you've been given your opportunity to, no opportunity to express myself, as if I were somebody deliberately trying to sabotage the work. That's how I was treated. So let's just get rid of her. But you know what? I'm sure that at some point he'll call me and ask me to work on another project. That's what's baffling about this. That people are so unaware and unconscious of how their actions impact human beings. So insensitive to that. And he used to be an admiral in the Navy. They know how to be leaders. Yeah, so that's my personal experience of that. I tried to work on it by telling these stories. As you know, all my books have a lot of stories, interviews. I've always done a lot of interviews and stories where people talk about how they've been successful because of the people and the relationships and the conversations, and how important that is. And it reaches some people.
Absolutely. Rosa, what I'm hearing from you is, in your case, I think you being marginalized from within the organization, and I don't know, I mean, you haven't made it explicit so far, but what do you think was the reason for marginalization? That's one question. And the other thing is that, how does that connect with the theme of the book, which talks about the dissatisfaction of a particular clan or a group, which you call safety professionals? I mean, how does that compare with it? So there are two questions there.
Okay, would you say just one at a time?
Yeah,
What was the
sure.
first
So
question?
let's start with the first one. You
Yeah.
did not, I mean, of course, now when you look back and try and make sense of it, what was the reason for this marginalization? Am I jumping too far ahead by saying that you thought that you were a woman in the industry? Or do you think, or is that what you said?
Well, that was definitely one part of it, especially when they use those descriptors of, I said, okay, they wouldn't say that about a man, and men promote themselves all the time, and frankly, women promote themselves all the time. So why was it the particular culture of this one company where you're not allowed to? And I overstepped the boundary there. But I think if I have to learn, only way to learn is to look at your own contribution to the situation. And what I did was I offered information that was not requested, was not asked for. And by doing that, I interfered with getting there through their agendas. That was one thing they said, that they couldn't get through their meeting agenda because I kept sidetracking them with questions. So, I mean, that's a whole mentality in itself. And so what I needed to have done really would be to discuss my view of how I was going to participate, and find out from them if they would agree to that, because I'm an outsider. Now, and if I were an outside, because I observe this with other people that are very famous men, usually white men, they can do exactly the same thing and not get that feedback, because they have a place. They, just because of who they are, because they're men, because they're successful, they have a lot of they always want to bring in oh, let's bring in Coughlin, Coughlin. Let's bring in Decker, let's bring in so and so. They have the ultimate word of knowledge. And I can assure you, if they had brought in Decker, that he would have devastated them, because he doesn't hold back in his criticism, But they would have said, oh, wow, that's so wise. No, there's no justification for it. So what I try to do and teach other people in my situation is, okay, what I learned myself is, don't offer knowledge to people who haven't asked for it. It's very simple.
It's so synchronous because um, I can say the same thing about a woman who wrote to me after attending not one, a couple of my sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and saying exactly that you came across as criticizing every other safety expert in your meeting, and in your online session. It was a Zoom session, and I
Mm-hmm.
asked the question, is that so? And she said yes, and at one point you even had a kind of wicked smile on your face when you were actually doing that. And I struggled because I just could not make meaning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you say that, because that person firmly believed that I was being arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know to date. I can only ask other people. There were about 11 people more in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. None of them actually said anything of that sort. So I still struggle to understand to date. Was that a meaning she attributed, or was that situation really present in that space? I don't know, Rosa. But let's move on from here. It's a really interesting thing, because what I wanted to understand from you was that, yes, now that you've explained it, um, this is a man versus woman issue, and more specifically, a white man versus a woman of color issue, right? That happens in my world also, in my personal world also. But my question now was to you was that, how does that show up in a book that talks about safety professionals? What is the message of this book? How do you see that playing in your book, that those dynamics?
I was triggered by one of my interviews where it was a white male, and he said, I think we're going to have to look at some of this information that's coming out about inclusion and belonging, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, uh, as it applies to safety professionals, because I constantly feel excluded. So it was like a wake-up call. Whoa, okay. So that's a whole other dimension to exclusion. Nobody else has written about it. There is some interesting work on they're on people, they're called peripheral experts. They're people with mental health workers experience it all the time. You're brought in to help because there's a mental health situation, but then, oh, well, we can't give people that time off because it's going to interfere with the getting the work done, right? So they're called peripheral experts because they're not part of the core business. They're not core business partners. They don't understand. They interfere with the real work that needs to be done. And yet you've been called there because there's a real problem, and they need your expertise, and now they're not listening to you. So that's the safety professional for you. And even the ones who weren't thinking, first of all, I would have to say 50%, more than 50% of the people I interviewed admitted that they were thinking of quitting their job. Maybe 10% felt that they were in a job that they liked, that had purpose. So that it doesn't mean that the ones who weren't thinking about quitting their job were actually fulfilled. It just means that they're able to acclimate. So you'll see when you read my book, they'll say, well, I'm mostly ignored, but I go about my work and this is what I feel I'm accomplishing. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you do an internal assessment and you fix the situation internally. Not many people can do that. Most of them go into stress mode, depression, all kinds of illnesses because they're so stressed. And then you have the suicide problem, which Sam Goodman wrote about in his book, that he was tired of seeing his friends committing suicide that work in safety. Okay, well, I'm sure the construction industry has a higher suicide rate. Why is that? What's going on? So that's what it has to do with the safety
Oh,
professionals.
yes, absolutely.
They're just an example. They're not the problem. It's an example of a problem that we have in our workplaces.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, thematically, there is a theme that reappears from your own experience into a whole industry or a whole group of people, which is this risk and safety people. And I wanted to just give you a flavor of my own world, Rosa. That 6 years in the North Sea, I used to be a safety inspector, auditor, investigator, whatever you and the and then it was quite a meaningless work job in many ways, and also being, I think I was one of the few Asians in the organization. There were a few, but one of the ways I started to find meaning in my work was when I used to go on board ships and very regularly and interact with seafarers and oil workers, and that was the time I used to really enjoy my work. And one of the themes, and this is how I've started to find my internal meaning. And I would actually, those days, I was very, very interested in the idea of work as imagined versus work as done. And one of the journals I used to maintain for a very long time was that uh, how do you write a procedure about something, and tell me how do you actually do it in reality. And I collected about maybe more than 1,000 stories of that.
Mm,
I said that was my meaning making, and that's how I used to keep myself sane in that work.
yes.
So that really, I mean, and I think having that kind of purpose and meaning, or some way to 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 release that negative energy is very important, because it's very easy, as you very rightly said, to go into the negative spiral and start to feel suicidal and whatnot. So yes, but I think this theme about people not being, finding fulfillment in their work, it's not just restricted to risk and safety, right? There are many other professions.
Absolutely. As I was
Yeah.
saying, the mental health people, the organizational development, a lot of people in HR feel that way. It basically, I narrowed it down to people who have influence, who don't have any influence, that are being asked to fix these very difficult problems, which have to do with people. And so there's a complete disconnect and lack of appreciation. The root cause being there's a lack of appreciation for the role of the human psyche in organizations.
Yeah, but isn't it inherent to the whole idea of an organization to take control away from people and centralize it in some? I mean, if you look at the great example of Adam Smith, you break even the process of creating a pin into 16 different processes.
Mhm.
So you're left with repetitive, mundane kind of work. So is the fulfillment. I'm reminded of a story of a baker. As a bakery in Italy, Rosa, where the only time the baker used to find joy was come back home and bake his own bread, because everything was mechanized in the workplace. So it is, I think it's a much bigger problem. But what I'm interested to hear from you is that what makes risk and safety so so such so so dissatisfact so dis I mean, people so dissatisfied in their roles who are fulfilling this responsibility, because surely there is an expectation here which is not being met with some kind of a reality, isn't it? Will talk me through that. What have you found in your book?
I'm not certain. Are you asking what it is about safety and health that creates that dynamic?
Yes, absolutely. I want to hear from you.
Well, it has to do with from the conversations and interactions I've had. It seems to boil down to I seem to be the only one that cares about the people. And I'm not being heard. And therefore, there's a lot of suffering going on around me. So that's a certain personality type, which I identify with being in organizational development, is that you go to school, you study, and you get all these methodologies to improve communication and collaboration and you know, motivation, employee motivation, and all of that. And then you go into the workplace and you find out that there's no support for it, even if they say they're hiring you for that. When you start to try to implement these things, you can't. And as I said, it's not just safety, but safety is attracting more and more. And one of my interviews, someone remarked that it could be because of the number of women entering the safety field, which used to be completely male dominated. It's now maybe a third women. That the presence of women is changing the focus of safety and health, and men too that are attracted seem to have the people that express concern about people have that strong feminine influence, because the feminine energy isn't just about men and women, it's a personality way of being in the world. So there's a lot of, well, like you have a lot of feminine energy. It expresses itself as listening and really caring to understand about other people. The masculine energy doesn't have that.
This is fascinating because Aberdeen, where I live, has traditionally been a very masculine industry, starting from fishing, granite work, and now oil and gas. So, and if you go to the museum, there is a beautiful picture there of men working in one place, and this is how where it has led to. So, as Jung would say, the masculine side of every man is overly developed, and the feminine side is missing, or the anima and the animus, as we call it. Um, but Rosa, what I'm thinking as you are speaking is that, first of all, I want to hear from you when you say people who care for others, what do you mean by that? What is caring in your world? What does it actually mean? And the second question I have is, why is it that people who feel that they care for other people find themselves outgroped? So let's talk the first one first. From your research, from your experience, what does caring even mean?
Well, I think it starts with empathy, which not everybody has. But when you are able to feel other people's pain, it feels as your own. And so you're motivated to try and help the other person. And you care that they're in pain because you're in pain. I think it's that simple. and some people are much more empathetic than others. I think we call them empaths, you know. And I think I am one of those people, not to an extreme sense, but I am like I'll walk into a room and I immediately feel tension if there is any uneasiness. I literally my stomach gets into knots and starts to feel that way. So I'm very sensitive to the energy that other people. I can tell if you like me the second you lay eyes on me because you we humans decide what the other person is within seconds without
We do.
any other further ado, you know? So if somebody looks at you and you're like, I'm like stunned sometimes how some people have completely dismissed me within the first few seconds. And I know it's there. So then you go about the process. If it's important to you, you go about the process of trying to
Yeah.
develop a relationship, but it never you're never able to develop the kind of relationship you can with somebody who is open, like curious, or maybe even likes you because you remind them of their mother or something, you know?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And Rosa, why? I mean, it's such a noble trait, isn't it, to be able to feel another person's pain, to be able to empathize with them, as you very rightly said. And my question really was that what makes these people outgrouped from the larger organization? What is it that you what is it that you discovered puts them out of?
Well, it was quite a shock to me because I had never had that thought before um, that the people that caring what it's called caring too much about people. I forget who said it. It was one of the interviews I did. He said, "Oh, you know, we just the problem with safety is they have to stop. They care too much. They have to just stop that because if they keep that up, they're not going to be able to be effective." Which may be true. I mean, caring is one thing, but not having it cloud your mind so that you can't, you know, think about what strategies you're going to use. Then it becomes a weakness. So everything is a strength or a weakness, and maybe in between. So it had never occurred to me that those who care about people was a category that made you included or excluded from certain circles because I'm talking now about the people who dominate in the operational environment. They are not. It's rare to find an empath in that environment. You won't. It. I mean, I don't know if there are. I suppose there have been CEOs that were empaths, and I know there have been because you'll hear stories of uh, some of the people who, like when they had to close a plant down and they knew it was going to destroy the work, you know, everybody's life because the work would be gone, and the way that they went about doing it was so completely different than somebody who just only cared about the bottom line. So there are a few, but mostly people in power are not made that way. Maybe because being empathetic or too much of an empath keeps you from taking those actions that acquire wealth and power.
Yeah, you're right. That makes a lot of sense because there are ways of getting to wealth and power, um, but they're not. It's not expedient. It takes patience and perseverance, and not many people have that. Such a good point. And Rosa, so I hear you, and so powerful. So, what is the book? What is the message of the book? Now we hear the problem statement, we understand what you encountered, but how do you suggest moving forward in this book with this issue of people in the risk and safety world feeling marginalized? What do you recommend as a way forward?
Well, I'm hoping that the book is read by managers, people in power. It, it's good for people who are in safety and health to read it, but I would like the executives in safety and health to, I don't think they have the perspective that I'm putting into the book. They don't really, and you know, when you're mired in it yourself, it's very hard to see reality. So you're so busy justifying the way you're being treated, marginalized, that you don't have much empathy for other people who are having trouble with it. It's like, well, you know, just suck it up and get over it, because it's not going to do any good to talk about it. Nothing's going to change. Oh, don't even get me started. So so I want people to just have the information, think about it, and then begin to actively lobby for some of the things. For example, very early in the education process, we're lacking a lot of very important basics that the safety practitioners need to be successful in the social area of life. You know, how to communicate, how to approach somebody that has power when you have none. Because right now, those are the things that are really causing a lot of stress in people's lives. They're not equipped. You're told you're told you're going to go in and you're going to help people and you're going to help keep them safe, and then all you meet are obstacles and barriers because you haven't been told the simple truths, which is when you go in, start with humble inquiry and do not try to tell people what to do. Don't.
Yeah, very, very interesting, Rosa, because even in my years of experience, I felt the same thing, that the last thing you should do, even if you know the answer, is to go and tell that
Mhm.
here's the answer. I think, especially if you're dealing with somebody who is higher up in the hierarchy than you are, you know, from your very, very good life example, never go into that zone where the other person feels threatened by what you know. And I think that's the best way to do it, is to ask open questions, ask a question. Everything else is seen as a threat.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so powerful, yeah.
Yeah, and it can get very frustrating because you're in the position of always having to manage the relationship. You have to be very conscious of how you say things, how you express things. You have to be very conscious of the reactions, so that if you sense something, you have to immediately say, but what are you thinking about what I just said? And those are things I had to learn the hard way.
Yes, but Rosa, those are all techniques one can learn. But what is the ethic behind it? What is the way of living behind it? Have you thought about that? How should one live life as a risk and safety person or a professional, if you like?
Well, all I don't think there's something just particularly applies to safety professionals. I keep thinking about nurses and the situation that they're in. If you look at the stress rates there, it's and the fear they have of speaking out, to correct it, to give information to a doctor. I mean, working under those conditions is, um, it's soul breaking. After after many, many years, the only remedy is meditation.
Wow.
Only remedy is meditation, because you arrive at a place, and there's many forms of meditation. I'm not talking just about the one where you cross your legs and sit, and though silence is very important because the mind, it sometimes it has a tendency to rehash the past and bring up all of the obstacles and all of those things. And so sometimes that's why I said meditation is the only remedy, because you shut the mind down so that you have a chance to go back to the truth of who you are. I am enough, I'm enough. And I'm fine the way I am. I don't have to change anyone or anything. That's so liberating.
It is. It is. Yes. Is that what you also recommend in the book?
Yeah, it's I talk a lot about Carl Jung in the book, and also just the process of, I mean, not everybody's going to do it. What I'm hoping is that the person who wants to assume the leadership position will do it, because then they will be sensitive to what other people are undergoing and create that. When we talk about psychological safety, we're talking about the person who is able to reach that level of consciousness where they know who themselves, and they're sensitive to other people, and they learn how to create that environment that will allow people to express themselves, and until they reach the point. It's almost like you create this bubble, and then eventually, hopefully, they reach the point where now I don't need anybody else to create my psychological safety, because I'll just go inside, and that's where psychological safety lives. And I don't, it's very commercialized now, that you can hire me and I'll show you how to create psychological safety, or I'll create it for you. But they don't say, well, that means you're going to have to go into a little bit of a self-transformation process, unless you're already there. And that's a thing, that when you meet a leader who's just right on the cusp, usually they had a heart attack or something, where they realize they got to change their lives. When you meet somebody like that, you're able to get some work done.
It's so interesting because I've started doing all my workshops now, beginning with silence for about
Mm,
5 minutes before we even get into a
mm.
discussion. And I remember very recently there was an experience where we sat in silence for 5 minutes, and people were just constantly shaking their legs, some of them, and they were just waiting for the fifth minute to get over. And one of them, I asked the question, I said, so how did it feel? He said, my mind was racing. I just wanted this to end. It was very uncomfortable. That was fascinating to hear.
Yes. Well, that's what the mind does. It's built to do that. It's doing its job, warning you, right? It's always warning you about impending disaster. And it's so, it wears you out. So meditation is the only remedy. It's where you're going to find yourself. It's where you're going to find a place, a center of psychological safety, so that you can replenish yourself.
Yes. Although I don't agree with the word psychological safety, but it's you, it's your thought. It's fascinating. Anything you would like to end with before we give it a conclusion? Is there anything first of all, you're coming to London, of course, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person for the first time. But that's super exciting. But is there anything else you would like to say
Oh,
before
we
we?
haven't mentioned the name of the book,
Oh
which I
yeah, of
will.
course we haven't. Of course we haven't. So where
And
can people? Yeah, yeah, great. OHS Voices for from the Resistance. A
yes,
tribe shaped by marginalization and philosophy of caring is creating a new occupational health and safety identity. My goodness. It's a beautiful visual out there, Rosa. And where can people find this book?
they can go to, it's on my website, carrilloconsultants.com. And
Okay, I will include the link to your website, the and the blurb of the book. And is there anything else you would like to say before we conclude?
Well, I
Uh,
suppose if you're in that situation yourself where you feel a sense of desperation or just stress to the point where it's beginning to affect your health, that you seriously consider leaving that job. Just leave. And you don't have to leave until you found a new job, but you should definitely find you can find a place where you will be appreciated and where you will feel that you belong, but you have to trust yourself that it is possible and that you have the ability to do it. It's there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you for making this possible. It's always great to talk to you. You certainly made me think a lot.
No, it was, I just loved it.